event for always. All right, so it is my pleasure, my honor to introduce our authors this evening, our author and guest this evening. Steve Morse retired in 2019 after 40 years in public education. He was an effective principal and administrator in Bellingham for 26 of those years. He pioneered restorative discipline practices and utilized the arts and humor to make school fun and interesting. And he currently lives in Birch Bay. And as I said earlier, as a parent of a former Roosevelt student, I can say that all of this is true. My child never felt more welcome at any school that she attended in her 18 years of schooling. Um, so very grateful. And Steve is joined tonight by another beloved Bellingham educator, Denisa Anderson, also relatively newly retired and former librarian and teacher also at Roosevelt Elementary School. So Denisa and Steve are going to have a conversation tonight. They're going to talk about this book right here, 60 Years in the Schoolhouse, Life After the Bell. So with that, I will turn things over. Please join me in welcoming Steve Morse and Denisa Anderson.
Thank you. And thanks to everybody for coming. It means a lot to me that people took the time to read the book, and not only took the time to read the book, but took an hour after maybe being on a screen all day at work and to come tonight. So thank you. That means a lot to me. You were almost everyone on this screen was a big part of the book, because you were the people that were there with me in the trenches and all these years. Thank you. Are you there, Denisa? She was having some issues. I might have to do both parts.
She's muted.
I was muted. Oh, that's why you interrupted me.
Oh, if I had been able to mute you at Roosevelt, I'd probably still be working.
I would never have retired. I just wanted to say thanks to Claire and for hosting this tonight. And it's great to see Claire again. I had the opportunity to work with her as we brought authors to Roosevelt via Village Books, and just you were so delightful to work with, Claire. And so I'm thrilled to be here tonight to be with two delightful people. And I would never say which one I think was the most delightful. I'd hate to embarrass Steve tonight. You know, it's kind of his night. So, but I've had the privilege of reading both of his books. One is on display, and the other one I have tucked here right between Shakespeare and Jekyll and Hyde. Mm-hmm. So that was, I love both the books. Yeah, and Steve had been sending a handful of us chapters of his stories prior to publication for us to kind of help him with and, you know, edit. And I think I lost the editing title to Sandy Olson because she actually gave you feedback. All I was saying was like, yeah, that's great. Yeah, I love it. Like, yeah, it's great. So Sandy,
I started to suspect you weren't really reading it.
No, I read it. But old cheerleaders died hard. So, you know, that was my contribution, was to cheer you on. I think the one thing that you have in spades is voice, and teaching voice to children and how to write that is just so far-fetched. And I think, Steve, you have another career ahead of you for transferring your voice that we all love into your writing is kind of a deal. It just comes out so strongly. And I think even if people don't know you, they will know you through your writing. And so I really appreciate that. Okay, so should we get to the questions? Do I get to rate your questions? Do I get to rate your answers?
I'm just hoping you actually ask the questions you're supposed to ask.
I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good. How am I still working for you? I'm retired. Okay. So do you want to talk about Arts Infusion at all, or did you?
Sure, I'd love to talk about Arts Infusion. And you and Terry, two people who are here tonight, were the biggest part of that. when I was a kid, I didn't really like school, and I ran with the crowd that was beating up and chasing the orchestra and drama kids home. And so I missed out on a lot. I never got to do all those cool artsy things. And I'm sure anybody who knows me from high school will not believe that I was the principal at an arts infusion school. But it was such an incredible experience. The first 4 days, the whole staff, I think about 32 of us, went on a 4-day local retreat to sing, dance, and do theater and write poetry. And I was just not only personally dreading that, but as principal thinking, what am I going to do if like half the staff doesn't want to do it, or there's 5 or 6 people who don't want to participate? And it turned out they did a pretty rigorous survey because it was a grant program. And it turned out that most of the people there, like 26 of the 31 surveys, said it was their favorite in-service ever. And one of the greatest things about the arts infusion was the way it changed the adults. And I feel like it's more important who you are than what you know about this or that. And having a school full of adults who really cared about the whole child and about the arts and stuff was powerful. I might have ended up having a more artistic career, but I had a falling out with my 4th grade orchestra teacher. We had a different opinion of how Monkey in a Cage should be played at the winter concert, and I got kicked out of the orchestra. But I thought that some monkey howls and jumping around and stuff made the song so much better. And I think a lot of the audience agreed with me. A lot of pretty bored looking parents really perked up when I got going. But the teacher's interpretation was different. I got kicked out of orchestra and never really experienced the arts until Roosevelt. And I was pretty excited about that.
Kathy Diaz just said, "Oh dear," and I agree. It's hard enough
Yeah.
working for you, much less teaching you. Gosh. So you had referenced Mary Oliver in your book a few times. Do you want to speak to that for a minute about joy? Or
well, one of the things Mary Oliver says is, if you suddenly and unexpectedly feel joy, don't hesitate, give into it. And I always felt that school should be a fun, joyful place. It was not at all for me. And I wanted it to be fun. And one of the things we instituted at Roosevelt was a dance drill. I thought if kids are going to have to do active shooter drills and earthquake drills and fire drills, they ought to be surprised by a dance drill every once in a while. And so every once in a while, I'd just get on the intercom, say, stand on the side of your desks. This is a really important drill. Listen really carefully. The state of Washington has us doing all these drills. And then I'd blast the music and say, everybody dance. And my favorite part of that was at the end of that time, I always ended by saying, and you let me know if there was anybody not dancing. And so then I'd go outside the recess half an hour later or whatever it was, and oh boy, kids would come running up, Johnny wasn't dancing, Johnny wasn't dancing. And they all wanted to tell me about the kids that weren't dancing. And I always said, will you tell Johnny he better watch his back? And oh, they ran off to tell Johnny, and they were so excited. I think school has gotten so serious with all the tests and drills, and it's just heartbreaking to have all of the active shooter drills and all these things. And
no.
we had a lot of fun at Roosevelt, and
We did.
we need to be surprised by joy.
Even the fire drills were fun because you had your horrible Irish accent. Oh gosh. And I totally agree that there's lots of room for fun, and the kids love school. And so did we because of you. I mean, if we needed to find you, we would just listen for where the laughter was coming from, and we know that's where you were. The one thing that is a mixed review is when you'd come bursting into the room when we'd be teaching. You'd burst into the room and everybody would get out of their seats, Mr. Morse, and we would totally lose any ability to go forward with teaching and learning. The kids loved it. we loved it, except for, let's see, I think Lisa DeHaan told me that once you burst into their first grade classroom with Jen Noyes and you threw candy, which is bad enough. But
I don't remember that.
There wasn't enough candy. It's not only everybody piling on each other, there were kids crying because there wasn't enough. So yeah, but you
It's
did
kind of like
make
being a
it.
grandparent. You can stir them all up and then send them home to their parents.
Yeah, well, you were like an uncle more than a grandpa at that point. But yes, crazy Uncle Steve. So you talk about the power of story a lot in your book. And I had shared with you a YouTube video of Jane Fonda accepting the Cecil B. DeMille Award at the Golden Globes. Can I read that for a second?
That'd be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. It really touched both of us, I think, and really relates to this. She said, storytelling has always been essential. You see, storytelling has a way to change our hearts and our minds. Stories can help us see each other in a new light, to have empathy, and to recognize for all of our diversity that we are human first. We feel kinship. That's why all of the great conduits of perception, I love that, Buddha, Muhammad, Jesus, Lao Tse, all spoke to us in stories, poetry, and metaphor, because the nonlinear, non-cerebral forms that are art speak on a new and different frequency, generates a new energy, jolts us open, and penetrates our defenses so we can see and hear what we are afraid to see and hear. And the quote that you open your book with is, not as good, but I'll read it anyway. It's by R. Eric Thomas, and it goes like this. Every story, whether true or fiction, is an invitation to imagination, but even more so, it's an invitation to empathy. I am worthy of being heard, and you are worthy of hearing my story.
Yeah, I can't hardly add to either of those quotes. It's just so powerful, and kids just love your stories when they're personal stories about yourself when you were a kid, and they would just pour into the office at recess and want to hear a story, or what was your friend's nickname in first grade again? And stories are so powerful. I wrote another quote down. Let's see if I can find it. It had something to do with that stories. Oh, here it is. It's by Karen Armstrong. Story is not about opting out of this world, but about enabling us to live more intensely within it. And I just feel like story and art and music and all the cool plays we did, they're not about escaping the world, although it's certainly nice to escape sometimes and to see a good movie or read a good book, but they really enable us to live in the world and live more effectively in the world and see, like Jane Fonda said, you can see underneath what's going on.
Yeah, I love
stories are pretty powerful. I don't really consider, when Claire said I'm introducing author Steve Morse, I was like, who? I don't really see myself as an author. I feel like a guy who likes to tell stories and wrote a bunch of them down and put them in a book. And yeah, I just see myself more as a storyteller, and always wondered if I'd have a career, going around doing a bunch of assemblies and telling stories. But I usually got some kind of admonition about that wasn't really appropriate for this age group, or that they didn't really need to hear what you did in second grade, Steve. And so I think writing turned out better, but I love writing and telling and hearing stories. And that was one of my favorite things about writing too, is the people who emailed me and said, I read your book and this part really resonated with me. And when I was in third grade, and they had a story to share too. So if you haven't emailed me yet, email me.
You need some new stories. So considering all of that, I mean, you are a wonderful storyteller, and we know well because we hear your stories over and over and over again.
You sound like my nephews.
It's true. So why did you decide to write a book?
I had people encouraging me to write for years, and most of them encouraged, they said, you got to tell some of these stories about these kids. It's hilarious. but I found that most of those types of stories, you almost had to be there. And then near the end of my career, I had somehow been a somewhat successful principal, and people said, you should write a book for principals, giving them ideas and stuff. And I tried that for a while too, and it just never took. And then we have some really good friends in Spokane, and they gave me a book when I had cancer, and it was like a workbook. And I lived in Fairhaven at the time, and I could look out at the water and write poetry and do all these different exercises. And they kept telling me, you need to write a book, you need to write a book. And I said, well, what's it about? And they said, don't worry about that. Just every day, write 30 minutes. And so I did that. And pretty soon I had 60 or 70 pages on Word. I don't know how many pages that is in a book. And started trying to organize it. And I never really could get it organized the way I wanted. And so I turned it into a memoir and just put it in chronological order. And that seemed to work okay.
It did. It really did. And through reading your stories, I was a little surprised, and yet I appreciated how vulnerable you were and in your writing. Was that hard?
Interestingly, it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. My brother was the first to introduce me to Brene Brown. I don't remember what year that was. Remember that video, that TED Talk that went viral, 90s or early 2000s? Yeah. And I really started thinking about leadership and vulnerability and trying to be more vulnerable. And writing was like therapy for me. I forgave my parents. The hardest person to forgive is yourself. I don't know if I forgave myself, but I made some strides. I haven't completely forgiven myself. And it wasn't that hard, but as soon as it was available to buy, I almost threw up for about a week. I had this nauseous feeling and I couldn't sleep, and I thought, oh my gosh, why did I write all that stuff? And I'm not an author, and this is no good. I hope nobody buys it and wastes their time reading it. And so it did hit me all of a sudden, but interestingly, vulnerability has never been that hard for me, because I've always felt like kind of a schmo anyway.
You've always been an open book, that's for sure.
Yeah, I don't think I have many secrets.
No, even though you would whisper talk to everybody thinking you were telling us a secret, then you'd be across the way whisper talking to the exact same stuff. So yeah.
I shouldn't keep a secret.
You can't. It's so fun. So what surprised you about writing the book? Did you?
I was really surprised how much I liked it. You know how they say that you're your best self, and kids are their best self when they're in that zone where they're just so passionately interested in something that they forget about everything. And my mind is such a hamster wheel all the time that really the only time I can clear it is like in a really hard tennis or pickleball game or something like that. But when I was writing, I tried to only write a couple hours a day because I thought this pandemic might be long, and I was right. And I almost couldn't stop. And 2 or 3 hours would be gone almost immediately. It just put me in the zone. That surprised me. It surprised me how therapeutic it was. I probably would have paid who knows how much to go to some big retreat with the movie stars in the Colorado Canyon for a year or something, but I think I learned a lot about myself and life just by writing.
Yeah.
And this didn't really surprise me, but it pleased me how much everyone has some commonality in our experiences. Even though we're all diverse and unique, so many people wrote and said, when you talked about your childhood, this or that, or when you talked about this or that, it really hit me and it really resonated with me. I thought I was the only one in the world that thought like that, or that, I think that's the power of both story and vulnerability. we're
Absolutely.
all we're all not only lonely, but we think, oh, I'm the only one going through this, or what a knucklehead. How did I, and then you find out, oh, other people go through this same
Yeah,
thing.
absolutely. I love that too. And some of the pictures you painted of being back in the 60s they just resonated so strongly. We had it pretty good as kids, I must say.
We really did. We weren't so afraid, and we ran all over, and we thought a
No,
desk would protect us from a nuclear bomb. I mean,
life was good.
you just had to keep a school desk around. You were safe. You didn't have all these worries kids have nowadays.
Oh my gosh, poor babies.
Yeah.
Well, I love the way you embrace mystery. I think it's what kids like too. And it kept you open to lifelong learning. And you had stories about UFOs, and I don't have any stories about UFOs. And if I did, I wouldn't share them.
I wondered at one point when you were gone for break and came back if you'd been captured. And
I kind of wish some days.
Yeah.
So, but you saw a UFO, right? When you were
Yeah,
little?
and I can still see it as clear as day. Certain memories I have, and I'm a really vivid dreamer too. I read an article that they were looking for vivid dreamers for this research project, and I thought, man, I should sign up. I mean, I remember stuff so clearly, and I can still see myself looking up at that UFO and exactly what it looked like. And I was 8 or 10 years old. I don't know if I really saw one or not, but I think I did. And when I share that story, I'm surprised at how many other people thought they did too. And I think you have to be open to that. There's so much in my childhood religion. I was looking for certain answers and to be sure of everything and to know the right way and to be have the right person, be the right faith and have all the right answers. And as I got older, I realized that there's something to be said for the awe and the mystery, and that we don't know everything, and you do the best you can with the knowledge you have. But yeah, kids like that. I kind of believed them when they said their dad was a Sasquatch hunter and he saw one last week.
Anything's possible, right?
Yeah, I had a sixth grader in Eastern Washington whose dad was one of those guys. His dad wrote a book and was up there in the mountains all the time searching for him. And this kid came in every morning to tell me all about it. And I was like, yeah, that could be true. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he did.
I love that. Well, another part of your book, you also met a psychic right on the street. Did you mean Deborah Monroe?
I hope I don't run into her in the street.
Oh my gosh. So was that freaky? Was that interesting?
That was really interesting. The writing, my mom was pretty hard on us, and we all had a hard time with mom, except my youngest sister, who came along way late. I think mom was all in her late 40s, and she was pretty worn out by then and didn't bother her much. She has great memories of mom, but mom was pretty rough on the rest of us. And the psychic,
excuse me,
I was sitting on a bench during a summer festival or something, and Lakita was in the art store trying to sign us up for some art classes or something. And there was a lady chalk painting, and she kept looking at me and kept looking at me. And finally she approached me and said, I'm a psychic, and your mom will not leave me alone. I keep telling her, I don't just walk up to people on the street, lady, and we're in a pretty conservative town. She was from Canada, and she said, and we're in a pretty conservative town and county in the US, and I do not want to get in trouble or get my friend who owns a store in trouble. And do you care if I talk to you? And I said, oh yeah, you can talk to me. I won't be offended. And she said, well, your mom just wants to tell you that she's sorry. Oh. And it about knocked me over. And I still don't know. We had quite a conversation, and I still don't know if she really was able to channel my mom, or if she just said that. But regardless, it gave me so much peace, and my siblings so much peace when I told the story, because I think that's what she would say.
Mhm.
I don't think any of us are going to get to the next world and say, I'm still mad when you spilled your milk that time at the toilet. I think that's what my mom would say. And I've just had a real healing where I've kind of said that to mom and dad too, and said, I'm sorry too. I was kind of a jackass myself, and and I'm sorry that they both did the best they could and did what they knew. And I'm sorry that it took me till I was like 50 or 60 to get over some of my anger and resentment. And I think it's going to take me even longer to get over some of the negative talk in my own head that I hear, and some of the, and always feeling like I'm so stupid or whatever. I don't know if that will ever go away. But I was able to forgive them. And I found this quote by Oscar Wilde that about knocked me over. Children begin by loving their parents. As they grow older, they judge them. And sometimes they forgive them. And I thought, wow, that would have been a lot shorter memoir, but I almost could have said exactly that. I judged them so harshly, especially my father. I really judged him harshly, and he was just a good guy trying to get by. And sometimes I forgive them, and I did, and I'm very happy I did. But yeah, that was one of the most powerful moments in my life, and I still don't know if it was truly a psychic or if there really are people who seem to have a portal into another world or not. But you never know, I guess.
I know. Could just be a blanket statement all mothers say too.
Yeah. I've had to say that to my kids about 1,000 times. Yeah. As we continued the conversation, I started getting suspicious because she said things like, well, your dad's in the background reading the paper. And I'm like, well, yeah, but so was every other dad, I mean.
Well, I don't know. I think it's a lovely message, no matter what, right?
I do too. And it really, my siblings cheered up when I told them.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just really powerful. Yeah.
It's powerful stuff. I know. So as a kid, you got bullied and chased a lot, I read. And you also
can't imagine why.
I would have bullied and chased you. Like this tall. No. But you also had a hard time in school as a kid. And knowing you as an adult, I can see why. And I, again, wouldn't want to teach you. But how did that impact you as an educator?
Really powerfully. I let's see if I can figure out a way to share screen and put a couple photos up. I was doesn't that look like a nice kid who would never cause any problems? Or, I mean, I just can't believe
you look ready to go to me, but.
Anyway, it was hard. And when I started teaching, I was always for the underdog. I was always looking for the kid that needed the most help. And I almost couldn't give a kid recess detention. It's like, I remember sitting inside for so many recess. That's my father. He was such a good man. And I don't think I recognized it till I was about 55 years old. And
wow.
Anyway, we survived. But I just couldn't hardly keep a kid in at recess. I was in so many recesses, which is exactly what I didn't need.
Yeah.
I'm sure I would have been diagnosed with ADHD. And in fact, recently was when I went back to a psychologist to try to figure some stuff out. And I just couldn't hardly do it. And so we tried to do more restorative justice practices and tried to, if a kid just couldn't be out at recess because they were unsafe, we let them go with an instructional assistant and 3 or 4 of their friends to practice. And we just really tried to do it different. Oh, there's Denisa.
Oh, in all my glory, Vicky, Melissa.
We had a lot of fun at Roosevelt assemblies. There's Peter Rasmussen. That was Clara. That was one of your daughter's teachers. There on the right, and there's my grandson Cruz.
Oh,
anyway,
so
that's probably enough photos.
No, never.
Yeah, photos are fun.
They are.
Picture really does do 1,000 words. Yeah. But yeah, it really influenced who I was as an educator. I just couldn't hardly harshly discipline a kid.
And you always won them over. You always found that back door to kind of encourage them and befriend them. And those kids that are tough are the ones you really connect with, right? Because you work so hard to find that way in to resonate with them.
Yeah. One of my secretaries used to say, you're not a very good mentor. All your kids are in juvenile detention. And I said, that's the kind of kids I'm looking for. I wasn't trying to mentor the kid who'd never been in trouble or who, I was trying to look for the kid who'd been in juvenile detention.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely. Absolutely. Oh. Almost makes me miss teaching, but not quite.
That's a lot of work, isn't it?
A lot of work. It was all consuming.
It was.
And we loved it when we were there, but boy, it's different.
I didn't realize till I retired, I don't think, how much of my life it took. I had a good friend who was also my brother-in-law who used to regularly tell me, you talk about and like work more than anyone I've ever known in my whole life. And I always felt kind of bad about that. I tend to overtalk anyway, probably, and should have given him some airtime. But it does. It just consumes you, and in a good way. I loved it, but it really takes a lot.
Yeah, it's astonishing. Well, yeah, it takes a lot. So on to other parts of your story, the section where you quit smoking and drinking in the 3rd grade was hysterical and reminded me of all our.
It was really hard. I had to go through rehab.
I think every lunch period we ever had, this came up. I think every single lunch period. Oh, I stopped smoking, when I was 8.
Yeah, I grew up with some interesting neighbor friends, and I don't know how I got away with it. I got away with using that until about 9th grade, and then I couldn't anymore. But I got kind of bullied into everything from shoplifting to this or that. But all I had to say about smoking and drinking was, "Oh, I already quit in 3rd grade." And they were like, "Oh yeah, good for you. Stay with the program, man." That's so it was very effective. Who would have thought? But this might be a good time to kick it back to Claire and get some questions from everybody.
Sure.
Okay. Gosh, well, this has been this has been really fun listening to both of you. So I'm going to put it back. I'm going to put it in gallery view now for myself, because now, since this is the Q&A, I think it'd be nice to kind of see everybody. And
I love seeing all my friends.
Yeah, this is such a lovely reunion. Well, so so anyone who has a question, if you want to pop it into the chat. So kind of what I would like to do, since we do have a lot of people in the room, but it would be nice to hear from folks, is if you have a question, why don't you could just go ahead and raise your hand, or like use the raise a hand feature, or you can put the question in the chat, and then I'll actually kind of call on you and you can unmute and talk, because I think that would maybe be a nice way to go about this. So if anybody has any questions for Steve, please put them in the chat or raise your hand or something, and then we will get to you. But I just want to say that it just sounds like this is such an amazing mix of of humor and pardon me, humor and like real emotion, very personal, very personal stories that you're sharing here. Um, and and I appreciate your being willing to share them. So you felt nauseous as the book was about to be released, you said. How long did that last? Like after it was released and then people
Oh
started
man,
reading it, what's the reaction been like?
it lasted 3 or 4 days, and then I thought, well, not much I can do about it now, and quit worrying about it. but but I've been really pleased with the feedback, and thank you. So many people I'm seeing on this screen actually emailed me and said they enjoyed it, or it resonated with them, or it helped them, or this chapter really spoke to them. And once I started getting the good feedback, I thought, okay, that's I'll get over it. But it
Yeah,
was pretty scary for a few days.
yeah, yeah. Um, well, so Teresa has a question for you. Teresa, you
Oh,
want to ask it out loud? Oh, she's muted. Can you unmute yourself, Teresa? There we go.
Hey, bro, how are you doing?
Oh, hi, Teresa, another Spokane friend.
I was just going to ask you, do you ever get back here? I absolutely love your candor. It is just stunning. And the way that you can put words on paper like that, a lot of us think that kind of crap, right? I mean, we do as we go through that job, because he and I were both principals, but
Yeah.
we have an uncanny way of being able to put, speak truth to power, for one thing. So
Well,
thank
thank you, Teresa. Appreciate that.
give me a call if you're coming over here to Spokane. John and I are.
We are going to come sometime. I will definitely call you.
All right, someone else's turn now.
Well, while we wait, what's the general reaction been to your book from your family?
Um, they like it. My sisters, my older sisters, my older sister cried through a lot of it because of the parts about her childhood that were hard. And my brother really liked it, and my younger sister really liked it, but she was surprised because she came along 10 or 15 years later, and mom was really nice then. but but yeah, the family's been okay with it.
Were there a lot of stories that your younger sister didn't know at all? Was a lot of was
Oh
some of that
yeah,
new that was
she
all
didn't.
news to her?
All news to her. My brother knew most
Oh,
of them, and my one friend, my one childhood friend, who was in almost every story. I always ran him past him first and said, "I remember this pretty clearly, but it doesn't seem possible now that a coach would really say that." So I'd email him and send him the paragraph, and he'd say, "Oh yeah, they said that, and those kids chased us, and that one kid waited for me at the bus stop every day," and so it resonated with people who were there.
yeah, yeah.
And we've
Well,
all
Vic,
gone through a similar journey. I think all of us have forgiven mom and dad now. My one sister passed at age 50 of cancer, and before she passed, she went to visit mom and said, "I just want you to know that I forgive you." And mom was like, "Well, what are you forgiving me for? All I ever did was cook and clean and bake and do. All I did was work my buns off for you kids, and didn't go that well. But I do believe that in the next world, mom's looking back and would like to do better, and we'd all like to do better too. And one day we'll meet again, I hope." Get a second try.
right.
yeah.
I really do appreciate that quote that you shared by Oscar Wilde. The first we love, then we judge, then we forgive. That's I think
Seeing a
that
lot of
probably I
people my
think a
age
lot
that
of
are
people can
going through
relate
that.
to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and Vicky has something very nice to say. She says, "I'm going to buy several copies of the book. good idea to take to the elementary school teachers' rooms here in Linden. It's been a long time where I've read a book that made me laugh out loud, shed a few tears, and ponder heavily on a topic, all within a half an hour reading session. She says, thanks, Steve. So,
Thank you, Vicki. Vicki was my first student teacher.
oh,
Oh,
nice. Very good. So does
And
anybody
they
else
didn't
have
seem
any?
to want, and they never seemed to want to give me a principal intern for some reason. Uh,
Never? Did you ever have one?
I finally got one. I had to take a leave replacement job for a year to get one after they assigned her to someone else.
They didn't want you mentoring anyone?
No, I asked the guy in charge of it, and he said, well, you're a really good principal, but I'm not sure what you do is very replicable.
Oh,
that's
which could be quite a compliment.
What I thought.
Yeah.
That's the way I chose to read it.
Yeah. Oh,
Kevin.
Mr. Terpstra at Gulshan Middle School says
Oh,
that you
yeah, I did
mentored
kind of
him.
mentor Kevin. Yeah. How you doing, Kevin?
Yeah, I'm good, Steve. Yeah, I was gonna say you mentored me. You taught me a lot. You didn't know it.
Thank you.
But you know, I think I picked up a lot from you about how to show up to things totally unprepared and just improv your way through them. And,
Now you're seeing why I probably never got a formal mentor.
but really, the biggest thing was just treating everybody like with kindness and humor and finding joy. And if you do that all the time, I mean, that's the heart of everything. And I think I picked up a lot of that. So I tried to anyway. But I maybe didn't have interns, but you mentored people that you don't even know. So you just got to know that.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Kevin.
Yeah.
Oh, and somebody asked if you're writing a third book.
I started one in January. It was interesting. Like I said, I almost couldn't put the pen down once I started. And in fact, I decided my theme song as an author should be the Animals song, I'm just a boy who's been misunderstood. Or no, I'm just a boy whose intentions are good. Oh Lord, please don't let me be misunderstood. I just wanted to tell everybody my whole life story, it seems like. And as soon as I was finished, I don't think it was more than a week before I started remembering stories I'd left out. And I wrote that other book in no time. And then I started a third book about how my childhood fundamentalism has impacted sort of a more religious type book, I guess. And I went great guns, got about 40 pages into it in no time, and then I just kind of lost interest. A lot has been said about some of the evangelical politics and stuff recently, and I just didn't have much more to say about it, I guess. But maybe I will write another one. Deanne actually got me started on the second one. I told her, no, I'm done. And she said, oh, you got to write one more. So pretty soon I... So maybe this will encourage me to get started on a third one, but believe it or not, and my nephews won't believe it, but I'm kind of running out of stories.
Well, can you tell us a little bit about your other book?
The other book, Boarding Through the Storms, like I said, I just couldn't hardly stop writing. And I took a similar route where I just think of a story or something I wanted to write about or something I'd learned that I could put a story to. And then ended up at the end kind of figuring out how they fit together. And there's kind of a whole section on being a grandpa and what I'm learning from my 3-year-old grandson, Cruz. And there's a section on the title, Boarding Through the Storms. Feels like not only my life, but everybody's life. If you didn't go to work or weren't there for your kids every time you were having a bad day or going through something, you'd never get anywhere. You just got to keep boarding through the storms. And the story that came from, I'm almost kind of embarrassed to tell, because as a 55-year-old, I didn't have any more sense than to be the only one on the beach boogie boarding when all the orange cones were up and there was a tropical storm. But it's a good story. And just carrying on when things are tough. I think that's another part of vulnerability in telling your story. You don't realize what everybody's going through. And as you're vulnerable and talk to people and say, man, today was a hard day, or this has been really hard, it resonates and other people feel the same way. And so many of us just get up every morning and put our wetsuit on and grab our boogie board or surfboard and get out in the storm again. And nobody knows that. And certainly not everybody needs to know it, but it's sure nice to have a few friends that at least that you can share those struggles with and keep going. I love seeing a couple of my students here. That's great. That was, you look all grown up. But
Wow.
yeah, I don't know. If I can think of some more stories, I'll maybe write one more book. Someone said, why don't you just make them up? And I thought, I don't think I could make this stuff up. It's like, I don't know. I would never have thought to write a story about stopping drinking and smoking in third grade, just out of my own imagination.
Well, Kristen says you could do a collection of short stories.
That would be kind of fun. When I started writing, one of the authors I was reading to help me figure out how to write said, read a lot of short stories because those are the best writers. They have to be so precise and their language is so good. And that might be fun.
Gosh, well, we appreciate your sharing your stories. And I
appreciate every single person I see on this screen had an impact on my life. And thank you.
Well, I think it's probably safe to say that you have impacted the people's lives who are here tonight. I know, speaking for myself, you definitely impacted my daughter's life, who's now going to be 25 soon. So if that,
wow.
Yeah.
You're making me feel old.
Oh, well, but isn't that what happens when you're an educator? Is you get to see them all grow up. But yes, you absolutely impacted my daughter's life, and you're one of the few people from her schooling that she remembers specifically. So I know my family's grateful.
Thank you.
Well, does anybody else have anything else they want to say tonight to Mr. Morse, to Denisa? Thank you so much, Denisa, for being our interlocutor this evening. You're muted. We can't hear you.
Sorry.
This was a great program. Thank you so much for doing this, Steve, and all of you.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming.
Steve, did you see Karen Otterholt's comment?
I can't figure out how to work that chat screen.
Well,
here it is. Yeah. Oh, you are old, Steve. I'm glad I figured out how to see that. There's some nice comments and Karen's.
So much fun.
Yeah.
Well, if you haven't read the books, read the books. They're just so much fun.
Oh, thank you for saying that, Denisa. I'm the bookseller in the room. I'm supposed to put thank you for reminding me. So in the chat there, that's the link straight to the Village Books page where you can purchase both books. I mean, you've written 2 books now, Steve. We do get to call you an author, whether you're comfortable with it or not. You do qualify now. So, and a reminder that the proceeds from 60 Years in the Schoolhouse do go to the Bellingham Public Schools Foundation. And this event actually has been recorded. We are going to upload it to our YouTube channel at Village Books. So if you want to watch it again and and tell other people about it, they can always watch it on YouTube. So, oh, yes, we will make sure that the Linden Village Books gets copies of 60 Years in the Schoolhouse. Thank you. Thank you for the reminder, Michelle. Yeah, we need to make sure that that happens. So we will do that. And final words, Steve?
Thanks again. It means a lot to me. And please, please email me when you finish the book, or even if you're halfway through and say, wow, I really like chapter 12 or something, and this is why. I think that's been the most rewarding part of the writing, was to get emails from old friends. And I got a few that said things like, I always knew you were a pretty funny guy, but I didn't realize you had this other side. And that meant a lot to me too. I'm glad I was able to get my story out.
Well, thank you. And thank everybody for coming this evening. And thank you, Denisa. Denisa, do you have anything else you want to say?
Just thank you for having us and hosting so beautifully. And thanks to Steve for writing these great books. It's been an
And
honor.
thank you to Village Books for being willing to take a few in and put them in your local author section.
Of course.
And hosting.
Of course. Yep.
Hi, Bitsy.
All right. All right. Well, with that, I think we will say good night, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you all.